LA Blues. First, there was the night. Side of the highway, the moving short-sighted lights unblinking to the nonchalant gaze of all it passes. A man lights up a dirty flame like a probe scouting another man, although we've never met before. He takes us behind grass which exceeds my height a few inches. Then he's inside my mouth as I position to vulnerability. Moist soil, wrists staying as if I kneel. Eyes closed, he is received. Down here, I am closer to hell. With open eyes, I look past the silhouette. Stars shooting seeds in my mouth. I pulled away, spat it out. Almost a deluded fantasy. Then, the strangers distant like stars, where brilliance is in the warm white, lost on my tongue to its own bitter taste. The release is signal for leaping, and to lose suspicion, I became a remnant, an aftertaste, coats my throat with struggle. Walking back to the side of the road, cars and trucks still pass by, a shred of wind chasing after each one. The highway of my desire awakens. Under permafrost, HW. My distance from the surface is millions of years. With me are corpses, and corpses of ferns and flowers. I have lived with death all my life. My heart, I am another world altogether. Against my cold exterior brushes a warm embrace, and I melt as slow as a glacier into the shape of a palm, an ocean around me, unforgiving. I know of humans who proclaim stripping me down upsets the order, yet this world breathes like the demand to change. In haste, the air is fever, hot breath. My frozen wasteland mistakes it for desire to peel me to my histories, and I succumb. The air goes on, ever in its heat, wrapped around me. Eventually, when there are more corpses on the surface than survivors, I will be open, dead inside, just millions of years behind, and recognizing the sun is a concealing smile from rage. I would only further ignite its spirits of decay. Nothing in my heart. Ice completely melted, so a long lyric can fall into rising waves. Jacob Murray, page 30. The golden hour demands I surrender my copper plate, inscribed my debts, a reminder that I am a house in constant need of shelter. Among many things you'll find in me, paper clips, staple wires, pen and paper, 12-track playlist, cigarette butt, smooth river stones, waterfall sounds, stairs without rails, the inner extrovert hiding in every introvert. Quirks begin in the attic, seeping down. Here, foreign uncertainty is unwelcome. I chase the sun on the way to your house, found in miscalculation. I think we should break up, see as though the law is starting to cease. The road is an undesirable instrument when we are in the belly of the beat of our breaths. Destination 2, a sad song is born, and you are lost in the truth of my words. We can blame the wind for this awkward pause, but who's to say where the dust gets blown away? Girl, you are the love that slipped from my hands. Even in denial, I was meant to fish in the oil pond. I have chased the sun, but it remains out of reach. So until then, it is time to go home and listen to the glow of the moon touching my skin.
So, as with the last time, we will now open the floor to your comments. We begin with the fellows. Let's hear from Maki.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. General observation ko or impression ko sa collection or suite ni King is that it's very dreamy and mostly feel good yung poems. Pero merong mga poems na it's about sexuality and coming out. And I think na-balance naman yung dreamy na dreamy vibe and then yung sexual or sensual vibe. And then mostly I noticed that most of the poems are narratives. Like first poem is December 22, 2014, meaning it's a specific date. So I feel like you're narrating everything that you've experienced or everything that has happened during that date. But meron naman siyang tension kasi I was taught na when you're writing a poem, it should have a tension. So I think in the first poem it's really about acceptance, I think, by the mother. And then yung Talahiban Blues, which is my personal favorite also, is yung last stanza niya is yung epiphany ng poem. But confused lang ako dun sa line na he takes us behind grass which exceeds my height. So, sino yung us if, diba, he takes us, so more, may kasama ka, he's taking some, I don't know, that, confused ako dun na part. And then, yung sa Subjects of the Long Road, I think, it's just mainly a stream of consciousness while traveling. Feeling ko parang ganun. Pero I like the part na the first one, yung sa passenger, na parang binaligtad mo siya from the one who lives takes the bus, tapos binaligtad mo siya sa another line, sa next line. And then, I like the line cutting yung man in a pool, na parang super skinny niya as visually. And then, marami akong favorite lines dito sa Thinking About My Weekend Lover for Jerome. I like how it started. Your hair, if left to grow for a month or more, takes the shape of a mushroom cloud. It's so romantic. It's so romantic. I feel like it's so romantic. And then my thoughts have built a town for you. I like it. And each vehicle holds a puzzle piece of imagination to conjure a place, a moment. I feel like it's a universal idea na when you like someone and then when you're thinking about that someone all the time, like there are vehicles that holds puzzle pieces in your mind that could conjure images in your mind. And then yung tension, I'm glad na meron, kasi yung feel good kasi yung Thinking About My Weekend Lover for Jerome. So I thought na parang narrative lang siya na diretso. Pero I'm glad that meron siyang tension pa rin in the end na someday you're open to the idea that maybe he will live and take a different direction, not necessarily towards you. So I think that's where the tension lies. So yun, generally I think that the collection is just dreamy, feel good, with a touch of sensuality, mostly narratives, but at least may tension. Yun lang. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you, Maki. This is so radical. I mean, we're talking about love poems, gay love poems, right? In a workshop where everything is going to sound like that. Now and then, in a normal workshop, you would have one fellow with such a poem, and you would feel almost apologetic right? That, oh, okay, you don't want to, you are aware that you're going to sort of upset the elder members, you know. Here, it's so normal. You're right. Now, this is the norm. So we're talking about talaga ibang blues, you know, which you politely just called sensual. It's not just that. It's someone comes in someone's mouth, you know. So it's an orgasm, right? It's not just sensuality. It's actually fellatio, right? Okay. So Steno, you want to elaborate?
Okay, maybe later. Okay.
This is so fun. It's normal, right?
Yes.
Oh.
If I would describe, if I would describe the suite of my roommate with just one word, it would be relatable. Kasi habang binabasa ko siya, may mga pumapasok sa isip ko na parang similar experiences. Like for example, December 22, 2014, I remember my coming out with my mother. It was during my birthday, April 21st, 2010. Sinadya ko yun, parang birthday gift ko sa sarili ko. Unang-unang taong pag magka-come out ako is to my mom. And then, dito sa may mamaya ni Tala Hiban Blues. Huli natin yan. Jacob Mary, parang, although I never broke up with a girl because I never had a girlfriend in the
Never had a
past.
beard.
No, never. Kasi pangako ko din sa sarili yun na I won't use a girl as a beard. You know. Although lagi ko na ito nilalan sa Facebook ko na parang ang daming nagkaka-crush na girls sa office. And then, kahit nung nagtuturo ako sa mga students, na at first it's, you know, parang flattery. But at a certain time, paulit-ulit, parang, ano ba nakikita kayo? Katiri, don't me. But then, yeah. Subjects of the long road, since I like to travel, so parang mga musings ko almost similar sa mga musings ni King. Men in a pool, I remember Fahrenheit or yung sa mga bathhouse. And weekend lover, I remember my ex na parang every Sunday, dun ako sa kanila natutulog. And then, papalit ako sa work ng Monday kasi, you know, so late ako papasok, half day, ganyan. And Tala Hiban Blues, ang naalala ko dito, my trip last year sa Bali.
It's okay, spit it out, spit it out.
I know, it's just a safe space, so hindi ko talaga ito binablog, hindi ko ito pinapost sa Facebook, so sasabihin ko lang dito. Very few people know about this story. So,
But please don't Twitter this.
ayaw ka pala, may consent. Anyway, okay, sabi to Bali last year, minamit akong local sa Grindr. Then we met at the beach. Then when I went there, wala siya. So while I was waiting for him, there's a third guy who approached me, parang, where are you from? From the Philippines. I'm like, oh, I love Philippines. Have you been there? No, I mean, I like Filipinos. Oh, are you gay? Yeah, I'm gay. Then he looked at me from head to toe. Okay. And then he invited me to come over to his apartment. But I didn't know kung saan yun, sa Bali. I didn't have my wallet, just my cell phone. So sabi ko, wait. I'm going to meet someone kasi. So sabi niya, wait. So punta ako doon sa meeting place ulit. Pag ingin ko sa pwesto niya, wala na siya. Sabi ko, sayang. Pero okay na kasi, ang lakas sa amoy niya. So, sensitive ako sa amoy. So anyway. Then I met the Grindr guy, the local. And then nag-jive naman kami agad. Then we went to the beach. Then naghanap kami ng madilim na part. Walang Talaiban sa beach. But yung pinakamadilim na part. And then we did it there. Then while nasa second base na, sabi niya, wait, someone there. So pagtingin ko sa likod ko, may police! So naalala ko parang, shit, madalati ko yata ako sa Indonesia. Buti na lang hindi sanay mag-English yung police. So the two of them talked, and I just heard Philippine stories, ganyan. So while they were talking, I was slowly walking away from them. Kasi yung beach dun sa Bali, may pa-jail, so meron ng mga entry-exit points, so hindi ka makakatakbo agad. So while they were talking, tagal-tagal, almost 30 minutes, so lumalakad ako pa layo ng palayo. Naghahanap ako ng exit. Kasi malapit mga, siguro mga 2 or 3 meters na lang ako. Saka ako bilang pumalipas ng takbo, iniwan ko sila sa ano. Iniwan ko sila. Then, she messaged me, sabi niya, he's not police, he's a guard from the hotel, parang ganyan. And he's asking me to BG daw siya. BG daw yung police, sabi sa akin, my friend ko, okay, but I'm never coming back to that place. Anyway, yun na, naalala ko sa ano.
Medyo mababa ang self-disclosure rate mo, no?
Yeah.
Who needs poetry? You can just listen to all the confessions, diba? That's lovely. Now, you know, it's relatable. That's a very good word. It's familiar ground, in other words, if you read gay poetry and experiences of cruising, of being in a relationship that does not last, having a beard or passing for straight, coming onto your parent, mom or dad, you know, in this case mom, it's even more relatable. Probably the least relatable would be your ecological poem, the Under Permafrost, because you are taking an MS in environmental science, no? So it's probably for me the most interesting one, because it's imagine how to queer global warming. I think it's the permafrost is the one speaking, but the permafrost is actually a queer eye. And the thawing of the permafrost is a kind of like final revelation of the nature of the speaker. And of course, it happens, when it does happen, it's disaster. It's basically, the permafrost is the deepest layer of ice, and if it melts, everything else has melted before it. Meaning, the world will be underwater, almost all of it, right? So it is a kind of apocalyptic, global warming, ecological queer poem that has never been attempted before. And in that sense, the newest sort of piece here. And of course, the beard poem, you do feel bad for the woman, but it's not her. She's not the speaker here, and so she only gets to be a character. And you almost feel that she needs to write her own version of it, you know, because it is a bit predatory, I think, on women that we use beards, right? But then probably there is maybe what the rewriting of it could be a bit more, a bit fairer in the sense that you actually dignify the actual love when it was there. Because I think even gay men who enter into relationships with women actually do love them. And you need to dignify that because it is real when it is there. You know? So, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, there's so much to say. Let's have more comments. Whom haven't we heard yet? Michael.
Sa pagbabasa ko ng tula ni King, naramdaman ko yung intensidad kung paano niya nilaylay yung mga salita at parang nagkaroon ng connection sa akin patungo doon sa teksto at sa makata. Gustong-gusto ko nga din yung balance, pero ito rin ay isang paglalahad or paglalagdad ng isang talaarawan or kung ano nga ba, kung paano ang isang tao or sarili, paano nga ba nakaapekto sa kanya ang panlabas at paano niya ito kinukuha or paano yung perception niya dito. No? Sa pagbabasa naman, gusto ko din yung pagkaputo dito sa men in a pool. Tapos, yun. Oh well, nakakatuwa din tong kay Marie. Yun lang. Thank you.
Very giggly. Natuwa ka doon, may kawawa yung girl.
Natuwa ba? Natawa.
I was meant to fish in the male pond, you know, and she was female pond. So hindi pwede. Okay, more comments. Marielle, can we hear from you?
No. Okay. So, generally, I like the quirky and playful languages. There was the undercut where, love, be careful when you cross my mind. And there were some beautiful moments that I really had to write down, such as ice completely melted into a long lyric of falling and rising waves. I think it sounded really beautifully. As well as the I am a house in constant need of shelter. So for me, that was, yeah, it is really nice. For me, the piece that I truly became immersed in was the men in a pool. I think that, yeah, to a certain extent, medyo nasayangan ako because the piece is a really wonderful adventure into space. Like there's this in-betweenness wherein they are close enough, at the same time far enough, to feel just the waves of each other. So yeah, so when I was visualizing the piece, it's like at nighttime, and then you only see basically the outline, like chalks, of these two men, and then they can feel each other just with the waves. So I think it's a really beautiful possibility there. However, though, I think that in terms of texture and in terms of the visual aspect, the grittiness, the slick of the water, I think hindi ko siya masyado naramdaman. There were words that were used like ebb and flow, push and pull, but I felt that they're very easy words to describe this kind of phenomenon or that kind of situation. I would have liked something else, like what else do you feel when you're in the water under kapag gabi? And yeah, actually, yeah, in a way, for me, I felt that the powerful part ended, I think, in the every movement of another, and then that's it, and then the rest just came to me already. So, but yeah, so I think Men in a Pool is a really one of the strongest possibilities in this suite. With regards to the language, I agree that it's. I love how I can relate. I can relate at times. At the same time, I feel that there's beauty in the language. There's a strong grasp of how the poet speaks, but at times it felt a bit forced, and I felt that the sudden shift in the register of the language takes away the tension or weakens it completely. Like during certain moments we're in, for example, in the Talahiban blues, I want something gritty, I want something dirty, I want something gorgeous. But then he would use, for example, well, this is just me, like, he would use the term, then he's inside my mouth as I position to vulnerability. And I would have liked something else inside the mouth than these syllables, position to vulnerability. Of like something that I could really taste in my mouth while I read it. So, I guess that's so. Well, that's for me. But yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Mario. Paolo has something to say.
Hello, hi King. Just a couple of things that I'm looking into. First is that there's a recurring element of ice, yellow, lamig, frozen, and which is kind of a European context, or it's a foreign context if we are to localize it. So it sort of has a disconnect with the Talahiban blues because Talahiban is very local, very very ethnic, very Pinoy. It also roads and cars and highways are parang it's a recurring element. I'm not sure if you're fond of racing or you like men in uniform drivers and but it's kind of a recurring theme. It's important to sort of identify na merong nauulit na theme across the different poems. Overall, I have some very small issues with how titles are made. For example, from Talahiban Blues, I was sort of expecting with that kind of grit, the title, I was expecting December 22, 2014 to have a title like The King is Apparently a Queen, as an allusion to your name as King Llanza. Since it has a very first-person point of view, the observer's diary, so it's sort of a tala-arawan, the observer as an I sort of person. And then, also, my all-time favorite is of course Men in a Pool. For the same reasons that it sort of, nilagay ko nga, it reminds me of Call Me By Your Name. Yeah. It's kind of that liquid feeling that's very evident. And then, sorry, sa Jacob Marie, I just placed here. Hello.
Don't press it.
Sa Jacob Marie, I just placed here that the last sort of verse, I have chased the sun, but it remains out of reach. So I felt that the better ending was the part where he says, "Girl, you are the love that slipped from my hands, for even in denial, I was meant to fish in the male pond." I think that could have been a really stronger ending, as opposed to, so until then, it is time to go home and listen to the glow of the moon touching my skin. And one last, sorry. The Talahiban Blues, I think is everybody's favorite. I was looking at the title first, I was sort of hoping that it would have an alliteration on music, or rhythm and pace and cadence, because blues in general is, of course, parang music. Unless we contextualize it as Talahiban blues, which means ganap, right? Talahiban ganap, so parang ganun. I sort of saw a disconnection with a man lights up a dirty flame like a probe scouting another planet. Ang ganda nun. But although we've never met before, I was sort of looking for a reference to how to attach that to somewhere, like the initial greeting. If it's grinder, top, bottom, ganun. So parang, I wish it was settled at the beginning that we've never met before. So, but overall, ganda. Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Paolo. Fonzie. Alfie.
Okay, general comment, I guess. I thought the suite in general was very tender, which is a pleasant, I guess, a pleasant thing to find in contrast to queer literature often being contextualized within the oppression and the difficulty of navigating your way through a society that's homophobic by nature. So like, I thought that the tenderness was a pleasant surprise. But at the same time, I felt like I needed a bit of disruption. Like, tenderness siya through and through. So I felt like I needed to be disturbed at some point. And I felt this most in Talahiban Blues lang because it's also a standout for me. But I felt like it romanticized the encounter, which is a good thing. Pero I wanted, gusto ko ng patindumin. I wanted to be exhausted by the process of reading it in the same way I'm exhausted by giving somebody a book, diba? So parang I wanted to go through the experience objectively, not just for the ideal, but also for the, for the parts that you don't like nanganawit na yung jaw mo, or may amoy, may musk or whatever. So, or like the who shape, diba, the stubble kind of words. Can this be off the record or something? But again, and on that note, I feel like in queer poetry, I like it when writers go hard, a little more lang. Na para go hard. To push it a little further in that context. I'm really sorry, guys.
Hi, King. I think they already pointed the strengths of the suite. The moments of courage, of course, are very appreciated, and when the language is tight, that's when it shines the most. I just like to again go through random things, particulars in the suite. For December 22, I invite you just to read it again and see how. Part of me is what I'm drawn to in this poem is that you use a lot of metaphors to create that closed offness because of the closetedness. So we have I dress comfortably, curtaining. So I think the only problem with this is before that you preempted I am but a clear puddle. So I just want you to see the order of with how your metaphors appear, because then I'm wondering if there is a flip-floppiness to the transparency, because it's not a linear progression of being so afraid and so closeted to being so open.
where here it's fragmented. So just look at that order, I guess. For Permafrost, I felt that there was a tonal shift in the first part because the last the last line is ice completely melted into a long arc of falling and rising waves, mimics the against my cold exterior brushes a warm embrace, and then melts as slow as a glacier into the shape of a poem, because both of them show coldness first and then melting into a lyric form. And the first one is so intimate, and an intimacy by the warm embrace, manifesting into a poem, which, you know, could be that a lot of meanings can be attached, like epiphany expression, but there is some sort of like aggressive tonal shift that appears in the eventually where there are more corpses on the surface than the survivors. So to me, I feel a bit abrupt, disturbed by it. Maybe that's the intention, but like the first comparison of the warmth into lyricism is so different from how the poem is concluded. And then, yeah. For Jacob Marie, I feel like we do get the artifacts of the relationship, but in these ironically concrete materials, but in an abstract way, if that makes sense. And there are a lot of externalities, I think, but maybe what I was looking for was the interior life of the relationship, maybe, because we only see it from a very zoomed out view. And then Subjects of the Long Road, I think it's a great way to show your breadth in writing, but I was just looking at each of it, and then like the first one has some sort of dehumanization of labor kind of thing happening. The second one was like a rendition, a painting, if you will, and then suddenly go general with the landscapes, and then the road it's just like a moral aphorism. So I was just wondering what joins all of these elements together, aside from that you can view them from one landscape, because there's a shift of structure and a shift of style happening within the poem. And I was just wondering about it. I really loved some lines and thinking about my weekend lover, like the lightning fast cars driven by abstract ideas zoom on a two-way street, and then it is often a bed in your space that is not a space, because my proximity to you is a needle with a successful thread. And I think that crossing traffic, the danger of it, is fully realized in the poem. I was just wondering about the hair thing at the start, because that's the only, I guess, bodily detail that's given to us. So it might be a defining characteristic of the person, but I just wonder it's how I was gonna say organic, but I was thinking of what we were trying to do with this workshop. I was just wondering how it's connected to the rest of the poem. Yeah, and yeah.
Thank you so much. Who else? Who's next? Can we hear from Martin? Yes, thank you for the...
Thank you. I think there's a journey in the Observer's Diary. From December 22, the author was coming out to a family. Then he had his, I don't think this is the first time that he did the Talahican Blues. Then it was apocalyptic. He broke up with Jacob Marie, and then he journeyed with Subjects to the Long Road, and then he gathered a man in a pool, and then finally ended up with Jerome. So I was looking at it as a journey from in the suite, in the entire suite. But looking at the pieces inside it, I am seeing a lot of great lines. And I admire the poet for coming up with these lines, which is really commendable. But I'm afraid there are parts which I'm thinking
if I break these lines into paragraph, are they going to end up as prose? So that's my fear. There are parts like that, but I'm not. Those are very minimal parts. Talahiban Blues is very familiar to me as well. I am thinking na ang dami sa atin nakaka-relate dito. But of course, I think, yeah, may nag-suggest kanina. I would also suggest, tapusin natin dun sa orgasm, di ba? Parang, ewan ko, nakaganda lang ako dun sa part na yun. Para kasi pa siya, nag-reminisce pa siya pagkatapos. And I don't think it usually happens pagkatapos ng gano'n. You don't think about what had happened a minute ago. I think it just...
He wants more of it. Sabi niya, the highway of my desire awakens. He realizes that he wants to keep doing it. More.
Sige na. Kaya nakarating siya sa men in the pool. Okay. That was the journey that I was talking about. Yun nga, pagkatapos niyang mag-out kay mama niya, nagtalahiban loose agad. Tapos kinabukasan ng Jacob Marie. Diba? Nakipag-break. So yun, sumunod, ayun, naglakad-lakad, nag-subjects of the long road. Ayun na, men in the pool. Ang dami nito. I wish I was also there. And finally ended up with Jerome in thinking about my lover. And I love how the poem was arranged. And I think there is a lot of great poems to hear from this person. Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin. Oh, so lovely to hear Marvin. Such helpful comments. Okay, I think if the fellows are done, we can't let Kim speak yet, so we can turn now to the panelists. Who has the mic? The one who closest to the mic. Oh, John.
Okay, so I also like the collection because I can relate to it, but I've never done it in Talahiban.
Ito lang. Mga bali tayo.
Okay, ang dalawang favorite ko dito, yung Talahiban Blues, saka yung Thinking About My Weekend Lover for Jerome. But I think the 2 points can still stand some pruning. So, I have some suggestion kung paano siya ma-shorten. Because poetry being an art of distillation, no? So we don't want to see there unwanted words and unwanted lines, no? Or lines and words that doesn't contribute to the whole impact of the poem. So for Talahiban Blues, in the first stanza, yung then he's inside my mouth. And I don't like the line as a position to vulnerability because that's already understood. No? So, kasi lumuhod na siya. No? Mas maganda kasi then he's inside my mouth, period, and then moist soil wrist stains if I kneel. So,
aren't you troubled by Maki's comment on he takes us behind? So there's more than one partner?
siguro dalawa sila yung minang niya.
Takes
the
us
both of
behind.
us.
Both of us.
No, he takes us eh. So there's a he, there's a guy.
Okay lang
there's
sa ayusin lang yun siguro.
dalawa.
Lang
So
naman
threesome
dito.
siya?
Hindi siya threesome, di ba? Oo.
He
So,
takes us.
ayusin din
He
yun.
takes the both of us.
The both of us. So yun. And then, kanina si Mariel, naghahanap ng taste, no? So, gusto niya daw malasahan. Masarap. I think, para sa akin, more than enough na yung moist soil. No? And also, di ba, you're looking for a scent, no? Harder. So, I think for me, the moist soil is enough, no? To invoke, no, the taste, no, and the texture, no? So yun. And I have a little problem with stanza 2, no, because down here I'm closer to hell. Why? So is this a Catholic guilt, like the UST brand? No. But why hell? So I think you should rethink about this, no? Because it's a so Lasalian, not to have Catholic guilt. We don't have that, diba? So, yeah. And then, sa third stanza, I think hindi kailangan yung first 4 lines, yung almost a diluted fantasy, men as strangers distant like stars for the brilliance. So, I think pwede na to erase, no? Kasi diluted fantasy, bitter taste, no? I think there's some cliches, no? So hindi na kailangan. You may proceed immediately to the release is signal for living and to lose suspicion because the same lines, pag tingnan mo siya, yan din ang sinasabi ng first 4 lines. No? So, and I like the ending. No? It's a beautiful and strong ending. The highway of my desire awakens. So pwede mo pag-aralan para mag-grow. And, so thinking about my weekend lover, no, for Jerome, yun din, no? So I think hindi kailangan yung stanzas of 5 and 6, no? So except for the last 2 lines, yung tie the wing to the ground, love and take care. I love that line, no? So yun lang i-save mo. So yung home finds its place within the cycle of journey supplying patients, so may corporeal state, no? So hindi na kailangan kasi the same idea yan yung na brought sa first 4 stanza, no? And then yung stanza 3, hindi na rin siguro kailangan yung each vehicle holds a puzzle piece of the endure a place kasi na-mention na yung vehicle, no, sa previous to that, like sa lightning fast cars driven by abstract ideas. So because pag shorter ito, mas maganda siya, no? Kasi I don't want other lines to call attention, no, from the first 2 lines, no? Yung the first 3 lines yung about the hair. No, I like that detail. It's a very intimate detail of your hair. If it's to grow for a month or more, it takes the shape of the mushroom cloud. Kasi kung ang dami tayong pa ilalagay, parang makalimutan na siya, no? So yun. So for stanza 6, delete that except for the last 2 lines. Yung tie the wind to the ground, love and take care. So, it's a strong ending. So yun kasi, kaya maganda yung men in a pool. Kasi dito wala akong tatanggalin na line of word. Mas careful ka dito, no? Or as in your other points, kailangan pang pag-aralan, no? Baka pwedeng may itapon ng mga linya.
Masyado na mga harsh. Wala na natira.
Wala natira naman. So, 2 stanza lang.
Bilang yung marami pa mga dito, wala na. I'm kidding, yes. But that's good advice. Economy and tightening, right? When you do free verse, you really have only one unit to work with, and that's the sentence. And one sure way to find out if you have a lazy ear, if you're actually not maximizing the potential of free verse, is to lay out again your poem and get rid of lineation and make everything read like prose. Meaning type from the left to the right and see your sentences. Are they the same? The sentences can be monotonous, paulit-ulit. When there's so many kinds of sentences you can use. There's the fragment, there's the interrogative, there's the imperative, there's the declarative. There are compound sentences. There are many sentences to use. And if you keep just repeating the same subject, verb, predicate, you're actually not maximizing the tools of the trade. And I think the problem is, it was already pointed out by Marvin, if you lay out the lines and remove lineation, you're going to find prose. And the prosiness is so clear when you're working with abstractions. And you like the metaphor of the road, and you turn that into the metaphor for thinking and for desiring, that's fine. But then when you have an abstraction of like, poem finds its place within the cycle of journey supplying patience to my corporeal state, that's already prosy the way it goes. And then it's loaded pa with abstraction, so you're actually not working in the realm of poetry anymore. These are propositional statements, they are not the statements of art. We were taught when we were younger, Richie, you're not supposed to show, you're not supposed to tell, just show. Show, don't tell. For a while I believed in that until I realized that it's wrong. You're not, when you say kasi show, don't tell, it's almost like saying, just paint images with words, don't have a point. That's impossible, that's not art either. Diba? So, the right way is actually tell by showing. have a point, but then don't have it in a propositional sentence, but do it through imagery and situation and drama and character and the elements of art. And so, King, the strongest pieces, like Men in a Pool, is very strong because it's actually just an extended metaphor. The only challenge with this kind of short poem that's like an impressionistic piece is how to end it, and how to end it well. Blue Embrace is for a foregone conclusion, in my opinion. That's not strong at all as an ending. Right? A pool is blue, and then the men are there embracing. And that's already in the beginning of it. That's how I assumed it, you know? So maybe another stronger ending for that. And then, I actually didn't see the same trajectory that Marvin saw of like a kind of story that's unfolding sequentially in time. I think that there's really no such sequencing here that was predetermined because I refuse to believe na mauuna pa yung Talaiban Blues kay Giko Marie. Mauuna ka magka-girlfriend, di ba? Bago ka mag-adventure sa talahib. Kasi anong klaseng bading ka naman na parang nagtatalahib-talahib ka na, tapos may girlfriend ka pa on the side, di ba?
Pwede naman straight.
Pwede ba yan? Medyo talagang awful person na yun. Mas maganda yung tipo, meron kang girlfriend kasi confused ka pa talaga. Tapos pagkatalahib, sigurado na, di ba? The talahib is the deciding factor. But I do see that the most mature poem is the last one. And I say that in terms of the emotional state of the speaker. Because in the end, there's a certain adolescence to the wisdom of the speaker in many of the poems. Even for example in Talaiban Blues, no? Yung parang but the highway of my desire awakens, parang na-discover niya, di ba? So bata yung sensibility. But Jerome and the willingness to let go, that's a mature sense, kind of insight, no? Because when you say na someday in my mind you might not make a step towards me, it's real kay already, be ahead of all parting. Right? Ronald talks about how nothing lasts. That point of disillusionment, right? It comes later, and it's a good way to end a collection on awakening and sort of coming of age. No? And what else? This is smack dab in the middle of LGBTQ writing. No problem. I'd like us to remember the lesson we learned from Mariel's collection, which is that LGBTQ is a perspective too, not just a topic, right? And in her case, we were looking for the perspective in the actual style, in the actual form, rather than in the topic or subject matter. And we found entry points into that reading, especially when Shane said, it's a good way to start a workshop like this with something that troubles your garden variety idea of what LGBTQ literature is about. You know? Here, we are in familiar territory, and we are working with themes that are actually have been written about by gay writers. No? The Talaiban Blues, I suggest, I don't know if you can find it online. There's a beautiful story by Alan Berganas. I know that surname is so suggestive. It's Berganas, called Forced Use. It's the story of a closeted husband who is an academic and a PhD holder who delivers a paper at a conference 3 states away. This happens in the US. And on the way back home, he takes a highway and then makes a stop at a pit stop and has an adventure in the bushes. And he is abused. Like the man that he has this casual encounter with, basically beats him up, but also forces him to give him a blowjob. And in the end, he wakes up, he's completely beaten black and blue and loses consciousness. When he wakes up, he looks up at the stars and has this sort of existential moment of how the stars are using up their fuel and becoming completely consumed by their own brilliance. And he realizes, I want to stay in the bushes forever and to be used by every man until I disappear. Something like that. It's the best sex in the bushes story I've ever read. very good. It is similar to the Talahiban Blues, except raised to the 100th power. And but it does give to you that idea of the suffering that duplicitous men face. No? And siguro nga maganda na may duplicity pa to kasi hindi pa siya nagkakamot. Baka matama yung sequence. Hindi pa siya nagkakamot kay Jacob Marie. Okay? So what I'm saying is that there is allied literature, there's allied reading to most of the things we write, because we're actually not born into a world that's tabula rasa. It's a palimpsest already. Many things have been written. You know? So we kind of write over the script that's already there. And siguro the challenge is how to make it distinct. The responsibility of any writer is to read as much as he or she can, right? Because if you duplicate something that's actually being done better by someone else, you cannot plead ignorance, really. You can't. You can't say, oh, sorry, I haven't read it. Right? Like this sculpture, let's say the floating, levitating woman, you know that? The very controversial female ablation. Na, Diyos ko, sa like, for a century of modern art, ang dami na palang ganun mga sculpture, paulit-ulit. And then sabi nung sculptor, I've never seen them, I was not influenced. It's not an excuse. You're a modern sculptor, you should have seen all these things, you should be familiar. And it's not as though those other pieces are actually arcane or obscure. They're actually well known. He's just ignorant or insincere. Diba? You cannot really completely trust him, eh? Diba? Okay? So read as much. But having said that, King, Talahiban is yours. Talahib is yours completely. You can patent it. No one else has used Talahib this way. Grammar, King, I would just cast everything in the present tense for Talahiban Blues, so it's more immediate and it's happening and unfolding as you read it. This is confessional poetry, which is smack dab, as I said, in the middle of LGBTQ territory. Confessionalism should not limit what you can do as a gay writer. It can be one mode of writing for you, and even within this mode, it doesn't mean you have to always mind your own life. The best lesson in confessional writing for me came by way of Sharon Olds, who is, of course, one of the best sort of heiresses of Sylvia Plath. No? And I loved her work when I first read it. She had this poem about her first time, which is so powerful. And then I read 10 other poems about her first time. How many first times can you have? All of them different, meaning she would always just assume the same sort of autobiographical pose, it is a pose, and make you believe with each poem that this actually happened to her. But it did not. And then all these so-called great confessionals all gave candid interviews during their lifetimes. Sylvia Plath on BBC Radio said that she invented so many personae characters in her poems. Anne Sexton invented a brother that she never really had. So you see, invention is part of, poesis is invention, it's making, right? What is true in confessional poetry, I think, is the unbosoming of a shame, which was really part, all these confessionals were talking about nervous breakdowns, sad childhoods, sometimes rape, you know, a history of rape, etc. That's the truth. But the way they cope with the truth, the way they narrativize it, the way they poeticize it is actually larger than the actual experience, and it should be. The consolation of art is that it actually makes adequate what is inadequate, right? The reason we start producing art is that the art is symbol making. A symbol is a substitute for something else. We do that because that something is not enough. That's why we have to have art. Okay? So, so confessionalism is a good mode for you, King, and I encourage you to keep minding it. But you can also talk about other things in your career as a writer. And don't be limited by what you believe confessionalism. Yes. Pwedeng Talahiban ngayon, next time, public park, mga ganyan. Or sa likod ng truck, mga ganyan. Sa cementerio, yes. Or sa bato-bato. Ikaw, meron ka John, mga batuhan sa dagat. Kwento siya, mga kwento. Yes. So, we'll hear now from maybe Ronald, and then go down for the panelists.
Okay. The poem that made me realize that this was unmistakably gay was The Raven Blues. When I read it, this is Galan, this is, it reminded me of the earlier poems, right? So I liked reading this collection, but I noticed something, the author needs to excise some lines, we always teach this to our students. Economy is very, very important, Less is more, diba? I feel that this collection can benefit a lot from proper pruning. That's my suggestion to the author. For instance, number one. Number two is some lines, tend to verge on the cliche. All right. For instance, let me cite examples. Okay. I'm bound by the hands of time. Thinking about my weekend lover. Yung ganung mga linya, I like the proximity to use a needle. Pero nasira na, bago pa, hindi nakasalvage yun. But before that, meron ng mga hands of time, caress of waves, close in my inner world. I think, what I like about this poem, the Jerome poem, is the clarity of the situation, of the conviction, the persona, and yet, the way the conviction is rendered, okay, through the lines, is something rather makes the conviction less convincing. Get me? Or palatable. Kasi, for me, the best way to honor a loved one is to offer him or her, original lines. Diba? Fresh, something fresh, right? The love can become stale, right? But the poem need not be stale. So, yun ang problema ko dito. Kaya I agree with John Didoro, about the pruning. Gusto ko yung ending, last line. Pero before that, a poem achieves potency when it is, the more compact the poem is, the more potent it becomes. So I agree completely with John. Ito yung, as I mentioned, yung mga linya. Next, yung Night in the Pool. Tuwan-tuwain ako dito, syempre. I have experienced this in my life. Joke, have I? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? But I like this because of this one forced our writer to economize, or rather to be more economical. So walang sayang, di ba? Kasi hindi niya mismo, kumbaga, na-force na siya eh. Yet, ang problema ko, I'm looking for something else. For instance, yung Blue Embrace, naman po ng pool, di ba? Sana naging lang to, Black Embrace, or something. I mean, it's, for something that's, you want some lines to shock you, right? You want some lines to, to catch you by surprise. This one, I think, can be rethought, at the end. Para mas may power. I like the form, perfect name form, the economy, but, swimming and coming up for air. Of course, deliberate yung coming, di ba? And coming up for air. Pero cute. Get me? Baka pwedeng pang, I want to experience the weight. I want to be there further in the water. I want to be with them. I want to feel it. Okay? Parang tingin ko ito shortcut. Diba? Bodies listening. Okay? Eyes in brief meeting. Nagawa na yun nila Raf Galan. Okay? Ni Tadon Remoto. So ano yung bago? no, na pwedeng gawin. Yun ang invitation ko sa poet, no, for this one. Pero gusto ko yung cup, no? Tsaka ito kasi, at least, no, alam mong the form, has allowed the poet to, sprint, no, to be more careful. But I think he can be more careful pa. Okay? And yung Jacob Marie, yun din, no? Yung problema ko eh. The lines in the poems, in the entire collection, actually shuttle, or rather alternate between, fresh, okay, illuminating lines and cliche. So siguro, para mas maganda yung tula, buwasan natin yung mga cliche. Kasi yung Jacob Marie, ganun din. You are lost in the truth of my words. We could blame the wind for this awkward. Who's to say where the gusto ko yung foreign uncertainty is unwelcome. Mas gusto ko yun. Di ba yung mga ganun mga linya na lumulutang? Okay? Have chased the sun that remains out of reach. So until then, mayroong tendency yung poet sa ganyang klaseng ending. No? It appears in the other poems. So I would invite him to guard against that kind of easy ending. Alright? Tapos yung Lalahiban Blues, I agree with some of the comments that were given earlier. Yung it doesn't need to have more calm, to be honest. But it needs to have more sexual energy. Diba? For him to really want more of it at the end, this had better be good. Get me? Parang feeling ko hindi ba na-achieve yung level na yon. Parang medyo little fantasy, warm white tongue with scary, simple. But what else is there? No, that would make the persona realize this is what he wants and will want for the rest of his life. For me, the one that has equal potential is under permafrost. Okay, kasi interesting yung concept, no? And the line that struck me was in the shape of a poem. So parang nag-ars poetica siya, hindi ko malaman, no? Parang there's the possibility. There is a framing, the millennium. It begins with my distance from the surface is million of years. Distance, spatial, and then temporal. Interesting, right? What is the persona? What does it feel like? What has the persona gone through to identify with permafrost, right? Sabihin sobrang ano yun, di ba? For you to die, that must have been so traumatizing or something. So may ano yun eh. This one, I think, can be maybe more. I want to see more about the persona. Kasi pag uwi naman yung permafrost, underneath destruction, how else can this metaphor be extended? Or rather extended, rather fruitfully. Okay. Pero interesting siya kasi this is really, who's done this before? Wala pa kasang ganyan tula, no? So it's, I think what I like about our poets for this year's workshop is that they are pushing, the boundaries, and introducing us to newer kind of queer LGBTQ poetics, and that's the great thing. And so, yun, no? Yun muna. So, but I am happy with it. It's unmistakably gay.
Smack dab.
Yeah.
We haven't heard from Tom Papalan. Maybe just pass the mic and then we...
Well, generally, a lot of the comments that I was thinking of earlier have already actually been talked about. Especially with Mariel, considering we discussed a lot of the poetics indirectly last night.
at the Lung Center, how many did you do?
At our room.
were talking about, especially actually, I just want to bring one thing here because I'm not really at ease with the use of white space, with the way it cuts into like just parts of it, but then in the other lines there's just regular poetic form. It's pretty thick and can play out like prose, and then suddenly it cuts into parts where it already brings focus onto itself. For example, in Talahiban Blues, the cut where it goes seeds in my mouth, shooting, I pulled away, spat it out. It pulls direct attention to it, and then that's just really it. Parang there's no deeper use of the form here. And generally, I read a lot of these poems as poems of movement, which would have also benefited from from editing, from an economy of words, but also siguro with more careful use of white space. One that would have also been enhanced by the very economy it would have benefited from. So that's more my thing, how it looks out on the page.
Alright. Thank you, Tara. Yes, Eugene.
Natuwa ako kanina sinabi ni Steno na relatable collection. Totoo naman yun, relatable. Pero hinahanap ko yung dahilan ko bakit relatable. No? Kasi siguro, marami nang gumawa na ganitong klaseng mga tulad. At yun ang medyo sumpa sa mga bagong manulat. Sumpa ba? Medyo mabigat yung term, no? Sumpa. Curse. Challenge. Tutulaan natin yung karanasan natin sa paraan na hindi na ginawa ng mga dating o mga nauna ng nating mga manunulat. No? Kasi, halimbawa yung Talahiban Blues, ko naman gusto natin ito. No? Nagustuhan ko rin ito. No? Dahil accessible ng wika. No? Yung pala, sa wika pala, kahit nasa English ito, habang binabasa ko parang nakasulat sa Filipino. No? Ang gaan-gaan ang pagkakasulat. Hindi ako pinahirapan tulad ni Mariel. Para kailangan ko ng thesaurus pati ng online dictionary. Ito, ang natural ng pagka-Filipino, ng pagka-Ingles, parang Filipino ang dating sa akin. Pero itong Talahiban nga, gaya na nasabi na, napasa ko, hindi naman ganito, no? Pero yung diwa, yung kwento, yung naratibo, napasa ko ito sa, 3 volume ng Llanza. Ibang halaking lugar, sinihan, mas madalas sa sinihan, minsan man sa gym. Ito, bago eh. Siguro yun talaga yung nanggaling ka sa Lucena, Lucena.
Anak ko pala.
Lagi sa Talahiban.
Pagkating lote sa gilid ng bahay nila.
So, ito yung ito yung hinahanap ko. Yung hinahanap ko sa Talahiban Blues, sa mga susunod pang mga tulad, dahil nga ito ay yung title mo kasi Diary na Tala-arawan, Ang ganda ng Tala-arawan. Ang hihintayin namin ay iba pang mga ganap sa Lucena. Iba pang ganap sa Lucena. Oo, Talahiban 2, 3, 4, talagang parang symphony. Medyo na-bother ako dito sa I Am Closer to Hell. Sa Talahiban, dalawa medyo na-bother ako. Doon na, Closer to Hell, kasi parang inaano mo yung sarili, binababa mo yung sarili mo. Na parang, mas napapalapit ako sa impyerno. Hindi positibo pa. Sabi ko man kahapon, ano ba hinahanap ko? Positibo yung una. Positibong depiction sa bakla. Pangalawa, yung usapin ng safe sex. Kahit na oral sex lang to, mag-ingat pa rin tayo. Iba na yung panahon yun eh. Yung panahon na nagdadlad, hindi pa ganun kalaganap ang virus. Ngayon, iba na yung panahon. So, huwag natin masyadong tinatakam yung readers
Bigla
na.
magkakakondom, sisira naman yung moment. Bigla maglalabas ng...
May mga condom na lasang strawberry at chocolate. So, yun din, ingat tayo. Lalo na ito, yung magka-compress sa mouth. Ano yan dangerous, risky. Napaka-risky, Lalo kung bata mabasa nito, o teenager, wow, saan biyahin ko nga to? Kasi nasa tula. Ganun ako sa ladlad. Wow, punta nga ako ng sinihan. Yan ko sa akin. Mga sinihan.
Ginagawa mo na yun, i-confirm lang ng latlas.
Ay, wala na. Okay. Dahil dito, no, sa buong collection...
That's a very serious thing to consider. First of all, is it, when we say we want affirmation, we don't really mean to sort of get rid of the critique that we still need to register. So there is evil being done to us, there is persecution, there's suffering, we should talk about that. So kung hell, inisip ko rin siya, it is a theological thing, but it makes it so Pinoy. Na may guilt, di ba? Pag tinanggap mo naman yun, parang hindi naman Pinoy na. So tama yun, na may ganon, in the middle of this heady moment that you're giving head, you are assaulted by catechism. Malay mo yung speaker taga-UST.
No.
O nag-sign ng consent form or something. No, and it's a general comment. Guys, we're not saying, probably have in a suite where you have many poems, right? Some are critical, some contain critique, some contain affirmation. That's it. That's the balancing. And then, safe sex, it's a really debatable issue for art, for us to promote in poetry particular safe sex. If this, I don't know, for that poem, it's a risk we take. I'm sorry, everything in life is a risk. Just know that it's a risk. And you don't naman want your poetry to be promoting safe sex. It's not necessarily, should not be forced on you as a project. Sometimes, yes, you might agree. But probably poetry, okay lang tong moment na to, na ganito. Maybe in a play, you can actually have that, where you have a larger tapestry, and you can have some kind of discursive moment. This is a moment na parang masisira yung kanyang, I don't know, it's supposed to be a reckless moment. You let go of everything To be reduced to that, at talahiban, that's dangerous in all possible ways. Diba? May ahas dyan. Diba? May ahas dyan. Yes.
Sa advocacy, a lot of the...
We'll allow Cupcake, you know Cupcake, right? Yes. He's part of Ozzy's Pinoy. Are you?
No, I'm part of Love Yourself and Hash.
Okay.
HIV and AIDS support house. I guess, but I would like to go against what Sir Eugene says. Maganda yung pinapakita sa Talahiban Blues as risky behavior, as long as we're aware or made aware that it is risky behavior. Kasi the closeted male, gay male, exposes himself to more risks. While he is closeted, he is not given the opportunity to express himself freely because he's in the closet. So yung mga scenarios like Talahiban Blues, maganda yung napansin ni Sir Eugene. Risky to. And that's part of the narrative.
So I just clarified that he's not under pressure to change, to change the behavior of the speaker and suddenly make him insist on a condom. Parang hindi ko naintindihan masyado rin yung suggestion You're flagging it, in other words, it's acceptable within your own discourse in HIV/AIDS education because the persona here is obviously closeted and it's part of the burden of being closeted that you actually cannot avail yourself of the positive sort of message out there that condoms are okay, something like that. I agree and disagree. I think it's certainly some people really willingly enter into this and we're entitled to have our own incorrect, abominable personae. We're entitled to have our own benighted, ignorant personae. We're entitled in art to produce all kinds of people. Not necessarily to actually push agenda all the time. Siguro I'll forgive it, it's a poem. It's not a play. In a play, parang kung gano'n, parang may didactic element. Siguro I want that. No?
Siguro ibang poet na lang gagawa nun. Next project ko na lang yun. Safe sex. Safe sex. Pwede naman maging safe sex Talahiban. Hinahanap ko dito sa Talahiban, yung seduction. Hinahanap ko sa unang talata, di ba? Kasi ang bilis ng pangyayari, nagsisimula ito sa titigan. nawala doon yung titigan eh, na yung, alam mo yun, King. Hindi ko na kailangan explain kasi baka may maging tulako na yan. Tapos, idagdag mo rin dito yung tunog ng talahib, pati yung, ang talahib kasi iba paano parang patulis. Patulis. So, yun ang yung tunog ang hinarap natin, pati yung pakiramdam, hinarap ko rin yung, yung sense ng kati. Right doon. Yung kati, talahib. Ang pinakamatagumpay para sa iyo, King, para sa akin, ay ang underperm. Gusto ko dito lang ito. No? At sana, no, nag-masters ka naman yun ng environmental science. No? Sana, no, kasi kulang na kulang tayo no, sa mga makata na mayroong background sa science. Sana ipagpatuloy mo no, ang ganitong proyekto. No? At ito ang pinaka-excited no, sa iyong susunod.
Richie, and then we go to our video. And then, okay. Don't forget, we have a video. I don't know how long it will be. Probably the same 8 minutes.
Marami nang nasabi about certain things, and there are certain things I agree with, there are certain things I don't agree with. Like, I agree with the tightening and the excising of lines, certain lines mentioned. I agree with that. I'll just gloss over the word that was mentioned, relatable, but I would rather say instead that I admire the tenderness, the reading of the poem in the poet's voice, and the performance of the poem does complete this poem, right? At least, it's not necessary for all poems to be completed in performance naman. And then, when I listened to him reading, you really felt that beautiful tenderness and how the poem is completed. Not all poems need that completion, but this suite does. So, what hasn't been mentioned yet, actually, is the title of the collection. It's The Observer's Diary. So, is there a disembodiment happening here? So, parang, I see a disconnect kasi observer, the diary definitely confessional to, pero observer, pero we're seeing body. We're seeing intimacies rather than the observer stance. So, I don't know what's happening there. But, sa Talahiban Blues talagang siya, no? I like the tensions happening in this poem. And then it was mentioned na the down there, I am close to hell, that could probably be Catholic guilt and all of that. But there are certain points. I like how the poem progresses from an uneasy desire to a strong desire. So, it's masochistic, right? I don't necessarily need the titigan and the because this is such a iconic experience for gay men. Diba? Parang, and I think that makes the poem successful because people want things from it, ganyan. Pero I think when certain things are not provided, the cruelty or the uneasy desire for this kind of masochistic situation is emphasized. And I like that. I like the line down there close to hell. Because sometimes something that is so ecstatic can also be hellish at the same time. Pwede naman ganun eh. So, yeah. And I also agree with the best poem being Under Permafrost, right? But I also want to say that the third stanza needs tightening. So parang nalolost siya somewhere. But then, the ending saved it. Ice completely melted into a long lyric of falling and rising waves. Yeah. So there. That's my last.
Okay, thank you, Richie. Now we hear from Shane. Hala. She looks... Wow, yes.
Hello. I hope everyone is doing well so far in the workshop. In the second collection of poems in English by King Llanza called The Observer's Diary, I find there's a consistency in tone, which is successful throughout the different pieces. Because tone and mood are not visible and they're quite difficult to so-called teach. It's wonderful that King is able to render it so well in his poetry. Just turn this thing off. There. Also, I like the way he recognizes white spaces on the page as a resource in expressing thoughts through words on the page in the poems December 22, 2014, Dalahiban Blues, and Subjects of the Long Road. I am not very sure if deliberately sticking out the phrase "to a rainbow" in December 22 works. I mean, you know, could be discussed during the workshop itself. I do read this sticking out of the phrase a cue for a dreamscape intermission of the narrative of the poem, which comes right after that phrase. It's worth noting that except for this phrase "to a rainbow," everything else in this poem is flushed further right than usual. But they're all aligned, kind of aligned anyway, so I'm not quite sure what is the purpose, or it's not that, you know, this kind of nitpicking probably is an impediment in getting a poem, which I find the poem itself beautiful and a well-lighted coming out poem. In Dalahiban Blues, the enjambment and line breaks in the second stanza totally works, and I am happy about it. The poem is a scene of what must be called cruising, which is a quite familiar scene as far as what I've read in Philippine gay literature. This makes me wonder if the author would like to push the poem further to make it distinctive or memorable from the others that are also about cruising. Speaking of pushing a poem further to make it distinctive and memorable, the projects in the two poems under Permafrost and Geico Marie are very exciting. The poem under Permafrost compounds an environmental situation with what is most likely the discovery and or experience of queer desire. So, man, this poem can definitely appear in collections or anthologies with environmental themes, and to be queer on top of that, like, that's so cool. I like how the micro experience, which is at the level of the personal and personal and private, resounds with the macro experience, in other words, a public realm. And I like how this particular poem makes one experience indistinguishable from the other, making both experiences similar to an extent. And the poem is able to have and convey varied layers, at least one of which may be accessible through autobiographical reading. A minor change I'd like to suggest for this poem is moving the phrase "I would" from the 18th line to the next line, since the current enjambment in the 18th line does not add a layer of meaning. Additionally, when you move "I would" to the next line, that would make the visual length of the 19th line in step with the other long lines in the poem, making the entire poem more visually appealing. The author might also like to keep in mind, moving forward, I did notice a lot of enchantments going on in this collection. So, and all enchantments are kind of fancy and entranced, and I love enchantments. But there is also an undiluted power in full end stops. So, moving forward, the author might like to use full end stops sometimes. In the poem Geiko Marie, the title seems to be playing with the sound Geiko Marie, which is a confession. The reason for breaking up with a girl is suggested in the poem. And because the sound of the confession is generally accessible through oral comprehension in another language, I find the title works both as a revelation and as a conceit, thus an open secret. It also performs simultaneously the sense of exclusivity and inclusiveness for those who can get what it takes to means called aura. For this poem, the poet might like to reconsider, I feel, just check it out, consider the length of the piece. Maybe you can do away with a word or two. And in doing so, can ask these questions. Are there unnecessary words or phrases in this poem? How does the catalog in the second stanza, the things listed, including the current order, contribute to what it is the poet mainly wants to express? And third, as a possibility of removing some lines or rearranging the order of some stanzas being explored. These questions can also work in revising or rethinking the other poems in the collection. At this point, let me particularly mention the poem Subjects of the Long Road, which is a poem about being in transit, reimagining things such as houses and power lines. This poem uses a form conventionally used in drama to signal a speaking part. So initially, I thought the houses and the power lines were speaking. Does this current form and use of white space in this poem, do they clarify or muddle the piece? Has the author explored, say, how about paragraph-like forms for this poem? Explore forms other than those that look like stanzas. Overall, I find this a pretty good collection. There's an arc from coming out to cruising to the discovery or experience of queer desire, breaking up with heteronormativity, a sense of being in transit, the sensual appreciation of men in the pool, and having a weekend lover was the potential of leaving because, well, life is life. I find this is good work.
Okay, on that note, we turn the mic over to King.
Upon writing this collection, I was loosely inspired by the colors of the rainbow. There are 7 poems, there are 7 colors. So I tried as best as I can to associate each poem to a color, especially the properties of color and form of light, because light has its frequencies and wavelengths. Take for example, the first poem, December 22, 2014. I see that as the longest piece in the collection, and red, the first color in rainbow, it has the weakest frequency and the longest wavelength. For the length, I think for just one day, this is something that lingers. Because it's an event of coming out or admitting who you are as a person. And also the centerpiece, J. Paul Murray. Its color, the color associated with that is green. Green, I find, is a transitioning color. We're moving away from something na hindi na para necessary, like looking towards greener pastures, something like that. The following poem...
Question lang, King. Did you put enough into each poem so that such association can prosper in the mind of your reader?
I don't think so. Parang mas nag-focus po ako sa experiences rather than the colors. Blue is more a calm color. As in the subjects of the long road, you're just sitting from a view and you're just observing these things. I was thinking about this persona being inside of us and just putting voices on those characters. Men in the Pool, for indigo, it's a strange color because it's a blend of sort of blue and violet. Blue is a color of calm, and violet is a color of wisdom. And in a sense, parang being in a pool is a calming thing. And realizing kung ano man yung nakikita doon would work sa kung ano man yung epiphany person sa may isip niya that night. Violet for me is a color of wisdom. It has the shortest wavelength, but it has the strongest frequency. Yung isang line dito na favorite ko ay, "A needle would be successful thread. Stitching shut the wounds were past." Basic motion of stitching up and down, just like the waves. However, kung gano'n ka-strong yung frequency nun, gano'n din katiba yung bonded, hindi siya mawawala kahit mag-port. I dedicate this to my work.
So more science, right? Yeah, wavelengths and frequencies and permafrost.
And to the comments overall dito sa collection, I will very much consider all these sa writing ko. And I've had this conversation before sa Messenger with Dr. Eugene Vasco na I could probably try to delve sa environmental side ng pagsusulat ko. And probably even try Filipino sometime. Pero gusto ko muna focus din sa scientific part ng aspect ng aking writing process. Kasi yun po. Thank you.
Julian ba? Break? Yes, po. Okay, how long? When do we reassemble? 15-minute break. Okay, be back in 15 minutes.
Snacks will be served here po, so you can get them.
Wait for the snacks to arrive. Okay.